Please welcome Mark.
Again, thanks for the opportunity to speak at this very important workshop. Just to give a bit of background and to declare my interest, if you like. First, I'm on the management committee of the Illawarra Legal Centre, a community legal centre in the southern suburbs of Wollongong, indeed in Warrawong. And so my interest in this area has grown out of my involvement in the community legal sector, and particularly with regard to issues of equality before the law and access to justice, and the administration of justice in this country. And the second interest I have to declare arises from my research, continuing research in this area, and I went to the Amnesty International Australia website to download some of their material relating to the national security and anti-terrorism legislation. And of course, being Amnesty International, they provide that information for absolutely no cost. Anyone can download it at any time. So I thought, hang on, I just can't take this stuff without being involved. So I became a member of Amnesty International, which is something I have to admit I should have done many years ago. Okay, so I'm concerned with not so much with technological issues, but with the anti-terrorism legislation and the national security legislation that's been enacted since September 11, 2001 in this country. And I'm concerned with what might be called the development of what might be called a national security state in this country. That is a state whose prime objective appears to be national security and the protection of national security. And whether in focusing so much on national security, the legislation that's been enacted actually undermines the country's genuine national security. And I'm also, of course, concerned with the role of the community legal sector in this, given its particular focus on issues of access to justice and equality before the law. And I want to extend the research in future to include other third sector organisations like Amnesty International, faith-based organisations and other organisations of that kind. So the paper considers the implications for the community legal sector of the Australian Government's recent national security and anti-terrorism legislation, and as I'll indicate later in the paper, there's a great deal of legislation that's been enacted since September 11, 2001. Indeed, a frightening amount of legislation, the culmination of which came in December last year, with an act that I'll talk about in detail later on. So the series of bills enacted by the Australian Parliament since September 11, 2001 removes many of the rights and freedoms that Australians have been able to take for granted. And this relates, for example, to detention without evidence, charge or trial, so arbitrary arrest and detention. And other issues to do with preventative detention and control orders, sedition and other issues that related to those. And other concerns with the legislation relate to the use of force, the new crime of sedition, or the newly defined crime of sedition, and legal representation for those held in preventative detention. I hope I'm not hurrying through this paper. I've been informed I only have 20 minutes to get through it, so if you'll bear with me, I'll try to get through most of it and not confuse you too much. And if you have any questions as I go along, please feel free to ask me. So community legal centres, CLCs, that comprise the community legal sector have the important role of informing citizens of their basic rights and assisting citizens in exercising their rights. So the paper considers what effects the anti-terrorism legislation will have on the community legal sector's effectiveness in playing this important role. Now, a question that's raised in this research, I think it's an important one. I won't give a conclusive answer today, but it's the issue of whether the Australian state and the Australian government really have promoted national security, as they define it, to the chief concern, the chief objective of the Australian state, and what implications that has for our rights and freedoms, for our democratic processes and institutions, etc. So the Australian Government's National Security website, available there at that address, is an important source of information about this legislation, and a quite frightening source of information, because you can see in detail the number of acts dealing with national security, anti-terrorism and related matters that have been passed since September 2001. The website is hosted by the Attorney General's Department and introduces and explains the anti-terrorism legislation that has been passed into law over the past 3 years or so. Michael Head, in an important article in the Alternative Law Journal last year, identified 4 noteworthy features of this legislation. It defines terrorism in sweeping terms, permits the banning of political groups, allows for detention without trial or evidence, and shrouds the intelligence and security agencies in secrecy and permits secret trials. Pretty dangerous threats, I would have thought, to national security. In seeking to protect national security, as defined by the state, it seems that in fact national security is being undermined. And we might think, well, there's a terrorist threat, and the government has to protect national security. That's one of its chief responsibilities. But we have to agree, I think, that the terrorist threat to Australia remains relatively minor. And the other concern, well, the other factor, of course, is that even if there were a real and present danger of terrorist attack on the Australian homeland, would the legislation in fact protect it? And I would have thought it's most unlikely that it would. So the terrorist threat to Australia remains relatively minor. This is in spite of Australia's military involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, and its support for the US-led global war on terrorism or terror. Now, it remains a moot point, of course, as to how you can have a war against a noun. We'll leave that issue hanging for the moment. Also often overlooked are Australia's relative geographical isolation, its border protection and immigration control system, which are pretty effective, and the fact, for example, that asylum seekers are now processed in places like Nauru, off the Australian mainland. And its lack of a human infrastructure with the capacity to mount a major homeland terrorist attack. So let's have a look at some of these anti-terrorism laws. And again, all this information is quite publicly available. And in researching this topic, it's been quite frightening, I guess, to learn just what's been done over the last few years without us, for the most part, even noticing. So this is a mouthful, this Act. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation Legislation Amendment, in brackets, Terrorism Act 2003. This Act gives ATO the power to obtain a warrant to detain and question a person who may have, that's my emphasis there, who may have information important to the gathering of intelligence in relation to a terrorist activity. The Act enables ASIO to detain a person without judicial warrant for up to 7 days and to interrogate them for 24 hours within that 7-day period. While being interrogated, a detainee has to answer all questions, provide all information or material requested of them, prove that they do not have the material requested. If they are unable to do so and do not provide the material, they can be imprisoned for up to 5 years. Another Act, another important Act. And again, these are only a very small selection of the acts that you can see on the National Security website. And it goes on for pages, that legislation, that list of legislation. So the National Security Information, Criminal and Civil Proceedings Act of 2004 extends protection from disclosure of security sensitive information to include certain civil court proceedings, commits the prosecution and conviction of individuals on the basis of information which is not tendered in evidence for national security reasons. It also allows for partially or wholly secret trials, evidence to be censored, and defendants and their legal counsel to be excluded from trial proceedings. Pretty sweeping powers given to the National Security Authority, so-called. Now, the culmination of this legislative activity in the area of anti-terrorism and national security was the Anti-Terrorism Bill No. 2 of 2005. And according to Attorney General Philip Ruddock, the bill's key features include a regime enabling courts to impose controls on persons who pose a terrorist risk to the community, allowing for the detention of a person for up to 48 hours to prevent an imminent terrorist attack or to preserve evidence of a recent attack, an extension of the stop, question and search powers of the Australian Federal Police, and enhanced powers for the AFP to obtain information and documents enabling it to respond to or prevent a terrorist attack. In issuing a control order, a court can impose conditions on an individual, including that they wear a tracking device, are prohibited or restricted from talking to another person, including their lawyer, and are prohibited or restricted from using a telephone or the internet. Now, it's only going to the detail of these acts that one finds actually what's been going on and how corrosive they've been with regard to our long cherished rights and freedoms. And I might add that the legislation has bipartisan support in the Australian Parliament. That Mr Beazley, for example, commenting on the provisions of the Anti-Terrorism Bill No. 2 2005, his comment was it didn't go far enough. And he wanted the power of the Australian Federal Police and the other national security authorities, for example, to have the power to lock down whole suburbs. How on earth any authorities, national security or otherwise, might lock down effectively a whole suburb remains another moot point. But that's what Kim Beazley wanted. Police can detain without charge a person who they suspect will carry out an imminent terrorist attack or is planning to carry out an attack. The provision in the Act allowing for a person subject to a control order to be informed why it was imposed is weakened by the severe restrictions on the disclosure of information. For example, when national security would be prejudiced. While the bill, as amended, gives a person subject to preventative detention and control orders the ability to repudiate the orders, because there is insufficient evidence formally to charge them with an offence, they would not know precisely what they were opposing or challenging. And the 2005 bill includes a newly defined crime of sedition. The authorities have only to suspect a person of seditious intent to use, urge or threaten the use of force for them to be able to invoke the relevant provisions. So that's the legislation. Pretty draconian, to use that term. It's important to understand the implications of the legislation. Now I want to go on to consider what the implications of the legislation are for the community legal sector, which, as we've already seen, is concerned with access to justice, the administration of justice and equality before the law. It's not long, 20 minutes. The Australian government relies on the community legal sector to provide free legal services to some of the most disadvantaged members of the Australian community. The sector has as its raison d'etre improving access to justice and equality before the law for all Australians. In providing legal services to disadvantaged individuals and groups, the sector is acknowledged by the government to be a key part of its social justice strategy. However, the sector often finds itself in conflict with the government and its agencies when seeking to improve access to justice and equality before the law for its clients. The recent national security and anti-terrorism legislation is likely to mean that the conflict and tensions between the government and the sector will become more intense. So there are more than 200 community legal centres across Australia. About 129 of these are funded under the Commonwealth Community Legal Services Program. And the program has a number of important objectives to assist people who are experiencing some form of systemic or socio-economic barrier to accessing legal services, provide people with early assistance for the provision of appropriate information and referral, and importantly, through providing appropriate casework, assist clients in gaining an enhanced opportunity to pursue outcomes consistent with their legal rights and entitlements. In addition to those objectives and activities, CLCs undertake community legal education and law reform and policy work. CLE is designed to provide individuals and groups with information to improve their knowledge and their understanding of the legal system and their ability to use legal processes effectively. CLE also importantly informs people of their rights and how to exercise their rights. Through this work, CLCs play an important role in maintaining social order and preventing social fragmentation. It also helps to maintain people's confidence in and compliance with the law and the legal system. In ensuring that people have confidence in and comply with the law, CLCs, as we've already seen, help to preserve social order and prevent social fragmentation. They thus have an important role in protecting Australia's genuine national security. The sector will, with greater frequency and urgency, be called upon to ensure that ordinary Australian citizens have access to justice and enjoy equality before the law. And this is a function that the sector will have to perform even while it continues to undertake the activities set down for it in the Commonwealth Community Legal Services Program. The sector's CLE work, community legal education work, will become even more important, focusing on the legislation that makes it possible, for example, for the authorities to detain people without trial or evidence. CLE work will also have to focus on the 2005 Bill's provisions enabling the authorities to withhold information from a person subject to a control order when they believe that disclosure would, for example, prejudice national security. Through its CLE work, the sector will also have to inform and educate members of Muslim communities and other so-called suspect groups about the 2005 Bill's preventative detention and control order provisions. For after all, it is these communities and groups who are most at risk from the persecution, harassment and arbitrary detention permitted in the legislation. The crime of sedition can also be used by the authorities to persecute and harass members of these communities. So, to conclude, the sector will have to be vigilant and energetic in defending Australia's national security from the national security authorities whose efforts to protect national security may only serve to undermine them. Thank you very much.